once in a while, we get to have our own Edith and Jordan Medley Moments conversation where we, sometimes check in on the journey, check in on how things are going. But today, excited to chat a bit about what we're seeing right now as it relates to the coaching landscape, the leadership development landscape, AI, all of the things. And so...
Do we get to talk about what it's like to be a grandma? Can you call me mom?
I cannot call you mom.
Okay. Edith, I got it.
No, we're going to keep this professional. And if a mom slips, it might be because you've gone out of line, which feels reasonable. So just for backdrop, when we started Medley, it was 7.5 years ago. Coaching was certainly something that had been around for a very long time, especially executive and leadership coaching. Group coaching was not really a thing at that time. And organizations were, I would say, on the whole, recognizing the importance of needing to invest in their people and supporting them through change. But the backdrop of what we're dealing with is completely different. So change is happening at a pace that's faster than it's ever been. The way that organizations operate, obviously, due to shifts in technology advances and AI, is completely different. And our business has changed too. And so excited to, I guess, first off, just hear from you, Edith, as you reflect back over these 7 years and actually really think about where we are today. What's exciting to you about the current moment and where Medley is positioned?
Well, you mentioned that it's been 7.5 years, and whenever you put a time frame on it, I find it to be a little surprising because so much has happened in the last 7.5 years. In this time period, we've shifted from a first vision of being an in-person, group community to a business that had to reinvent and reposition in the middle of COVID or because of COVID. And it's so interesting now when we have this conversation about the pace of change and the dramatic impact. Can we just talk about COVID for a second? It is distant, but it is not that distant because it has certainly impacted humans in the context of which they've gone to school, their views on the importance of being at work, the importance of being in person at work, and the significance of and understanding at a deeper level of the importance of interacting as human beings. So let's fast forward to today. What do we experience? Let's go back to the context. The context in which we are all living and operating is pretty extraordinary with many, many uncertainties and challenges and many things that actually are out there, including the entire complex conversation around AI that will no doubt change the way we all think about showing up, operating as individuals in the context of our personal lives, but certainly in our professional lives. And that's something that I think is and can be challenging, but is extraordinarily exciting, particularly given the work that we do at Medley. Medley is about understanding the human dynamic of individuals in groups. You could call it individuals in teams. You can call it individuals in organizations because we work so hard as leaders to find that right individual, but it's not about that individual and how they perform. It's about how they can operate and make an impact given the organizations that they operate in. And that's what Medley is about. That's what is exciting. And that's where AI, I think, will really enhance our ability to deliver into creating experiences where people can put to work the learnings that are required or learned by doing, shall I say, to really be impactful as individuals and leaders within organizations. The interesting thing about AI right now is it's a thing and it's showing up everywhere. Let me ask you, Jordan, we are in the human-centric business of creating interactions within groups with the help of coaches. How will AI or has AI or should AI impact the work that we do at Medley?
It presents a tremendous opportunity. The concept or the backdrop is people are starting to use Claude and ChatGPT as leadership coaches. That is happening. Companies are also rolling out AI coaches. So a coach bot that you can reach out to get support, whether it's via role play or whether it's to work through a specific challenge or whether it's to, be appointed to resources. At Medley, we don't have a coach bot. We have a high amount of tech enablement, and we leverage AI to help match groups as effectively as possible, to help ensure that we're streamlining and personalizing the curriculum for every group and for every company and for every cohort as effectively as possible. But the core Medley experience is with humans. And our perspective is that the connection that's happening in a group where people are coming into it expecting that they're going to learn how to be a better manager and better leader, and they do. They share that as outcomes, and we track all of that very intentionally. But they're also leaving with real relationships with their colleagues that continue after the fact.
That really matters.
Yeah. And they're able to actually practice some critical human-centric skills in that group space. And they're able to get the perspective of their peers, of the coach, share feedback to others. So building self-awareness, building interpersonal skills, building that big picture perspective is incredibly hard. I think self-awareness in particular is really a lifelong journey and a lifelong experience. But in a Medley group, that's always been the goal. It's always been the goal for people to work on those skills. And so, I think what's really exciting is organizations and many of our partners are really recognizing that you really need to have a tiered approach to supporting your people. Different types of modalities really support different types of learning. And in the age of AI, where people are being exposed to new tools, they need to build new skills. They also need to have an AI-ready mindset. And they also need to be able to lead and support their people through change. You can't just expect people to operate differently going through an online training or going through a virtual AI coach. You actually need people to practice those behaviors, engage with one another, and build connections and stay accountable to that learning. And so I will say I'm excited by the opportunity that AI coaching sort of in a one-to-one capacity does present. My perspective is it will exist really in a complementary fashion to human one-on-one coaching and to group coaching. Edith, you've described to me, I remember you were telling me that you were catching up with someone who was a professor at a university, and he or she described to you that they felt like they had a real connection and relationship with their AI, a chatbot. What's your point of view on that? I know that really stuck out to you, and I'd love to hear more about that anecdote.
Well, there were just so many different, I thought, interesting questions that I walked away with. You don't really become a tenured professor by doing the same old, same old. So think about what that means. That means innovation. That means interpretation. That means, in some instances, creativity of connecting dots that hadn't been connected before. And in order for that to happen, there's often a whole group of research postdoc fellows, and their role is to help you get smarter and more innovative. And I was really struck by this conversation because, he basically shared that he finds that he's spending more and more time with these AI-enabled tools, hours, actually, way more straightforward than dealing with some of his postdocs, way more responsive to questions. He didn't have to be delicate about the way that he asked questions. He could just say that was stupid, do more of this and do more of that, and there were no hurt feelings. And so my first takeaways were, wow, that's kind of interesting. Like, that sounds like way more efficiency. But at some point, you're going to have to go to somebody, I thought to myself, and get funding. And, you're going to have to develop influencing skills in conversations with someone who doesn't actually believe in what you're saying and isn't actually, focused on making you happy. And so I do believe that there's two sides of that conversation. There's the power that these tools have in creating groundbreaking new ideas in science, in business, in everything. But let us not forget that at some point there is going to be that important opportunity for you to actually sit across the table from someone and influence them to do something or not to do something. And that's where I think the work of Medley is super exciting and energizing, actually.
I read an article though a couple days ago in the New York Times that was it was like I went to San Francisco and what I learned there was surprising, which was that because so much work at some of these smaller companies was agentic, people were changing how they work so that agents could interact with one another and make decisions and persuade each other. Now, I've gotten a glimpse into how large organizations work. All of our clients are Fortune 500 scale companies. It is very clear and very obvious to me that the ability to influence and engage and storytell and connect is absolutely critical to succeed at one of these companies. And then you, of course, have exposure at sort of the executive level. You know, you're on the board of Amazon, the board of Pepsi. You spend time with CEOs frequently. And I'm sure you would say as well, at that level, deals are getting done via relationships, via, persuasion, via, very complex dynamics. But do you see a world where this sort of agent-to-agent behavior starts creeping upwards?
I think that there's a recognition that these tools have the potential to get you there faster and in a smarter way. I also think, however, that there's a recognition that in addition to that focus, there needs to be a serious focus on how to ensure that the cultural requirements of innovation, creativity, customer centricity are still front and center.
I'm glad you brought up culture, though, because I have been excited by the impact that Medley's been able to have with our clients on helping shape and transform their cultures. And I do think that, the organizations that are going to win and that are going to adapt are going to keep their cultures very front and center. And that needs to be done in a really thoughtful approach that helps people build relationships with one another.
One of the things that I find most exciting is the potential of understanding the individual role in organization's ecosystem, whether you have 25 people or 1 million people. And so instead of saying things like, we believe that it's important to have good managers. Okay, that seems like a no-brainer. Years ago at Goldman Sachs, and this was it's probably more than a decade now, I worked very closely with one of my colleagues who ran one of the large businesses at the firm, who was very data-oriented. He asked me, well, why do you believe that's true? I was like, well, blah, 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 blah. And, I had all these words. And he's like, well, we got all this review data. We know who is high performing. Like, why don't we get some of our analytics folks, our engineers, they were called strategists at the time, to do some real rigorous analysis with respect to whether having a good manager matters or not. And in fact, did the work and realized that, in fact, it is true, that if you have a strong manager, you would be more likely to be a strong performer. And so that took a lot of work. I mean, This was not a upload the information, look at the analysis kind of thing. But now we're at the point, if organizations truly invest in understanding what it means to be impactful in an organization, you can inform that and narrow it down. We were having a conversation with one of our partners at PwC, and she was saying they have 15 attributes that are human skills and 15 that are more
AI fluency,
fluent skills. And Yolanda basically shared that they got those 15 because they looked at the analytics associated with performance. And she honestly said, listen, we could have chosen 100 things, but, we really zeroed in on these 15 things. And that's one of the things that I have to say I'm very, very excited about with the progression of Medley. Often when you're building a business, you want to get to scale. And you get to scale in some ways by saying, here's our model, this is what we do, like
Take it or leave it.
take it or leave it, send us your people and get to work. But under your direct leadership and the leadership of the other folks who are driving the business at Medley, you recognize that to get the impact that we were really looking for, we really needed to take the time to understand and inform our work by the priorities of the partners of the businesses that we work with. And why does that really matter? It really matters because these are people's jobs, right? They want to get better as individuals. They want to get better as human in the context of delivering into the expectations of their work so that they can access recognition and rewards associated with that.
Yep.
And so that's one of the things that I'm not sure I would have really articulated or thought that would be the priority that it's been.
Yep.
And
no, it's been a huge input for our success and for our impact. Absolutely.
I got to tell you, running an HR organization with extraordinarily talented learning specialists, we were always sometimes struck by the fact that we set out these programs, there'd be like this flurry of intentional participation and then it would drop off. And one of the things that is most striking, and perhaps you can share some of this information, Jordan, about Medley is the level of engagement.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so high.
Yeah. 97% of people who start a Medley group coaching program end up completing the program. And attendance hovers between 85 and 88% across.
And these are busy people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a big piece of that, honestly, is in the format and in our approach, because people don't want to let down their peers. They know that they want to show up for others. They don't want to miss out on their group experience. And our clients also do a tremendous job of really positioning the value, and we do that alongside with them and directly tying it to the outcomes of the business and for their own performance. And so, that has been really, really exciting and rewarding to see. We
are co-founders. We are also related,
Like,
I don't know. Like, can I say it? I don't know. Like, people often say, like, they look alike. I'm not sure, but
yeah, we have to acknowledge up front meetings. Yes, we are related.
We are related. And steering Medley through this period of constant change has had its challenges. And can we just spend a little bit of time talking about that? With a team that's small but mighty, where the opportunities are real, but the challenges are also real, and life doesn't stop. So, we're super excited as a family that we have the next generation, and that is your life. This is your job, which as a startup founder can become very lifelike. Talk a little bit about that, and what advice would you share?
No, I think I learned early on in building Medley that I needed to find a way to make it sustainable. And everyone has a different definition of work-life balance. I think balance is a pretty false myth. But people have different desires and priorities. And so no version is the same for them. I think for me, I realized that I needed to, at a base level, make sure I was taking care of myself.
Yeah.
So that I could show up for my family and for the team. And so once I kind of, figured out those basics, sleep, exercise, eating vegetables occasionally, those things are important. Then was able to be more thoughtful about, okay, how do I make sure that I have other sort of practices that I feel like are giving me, joy and energy. And then I had my daughter about 18 months ago, and I'm going to have another child later this year, another girl. And so, life has certainly continued as Medley has evolved and as Medley has continued to grow. The challenges are real. I would say the challenges that I have now are less, aspiring to do it all, because I have absolutely accepted that that's impossible and I cannot do it all and balls will get dropped. More around how do I ensure that the most important things are moving forward?
And how do you work on that with your husband and broader
just communication
family?
Is just communication. It's all communication. It's so important. And then in terms of the team, AI is affecting Medley as well. We're constantly pushing ourselves to try to embrace and leverage these tools and rethink our workflows and create new things. And so that's really exciting. And we're seeing a lot of momentum in the business. So
Yes.
our clients are expanding. We're bringing on new clients. But it's fun because it's the right work challenges that I'm engaging on right now.
Yes. And I would just add to that, from my perspective, I've always known it to be true, but it certainly is the case in Medley. If you have extraordinary people, you can do extraordinary things.
Yes.
And, I have learned so much from those early days. I remember it was just you and I in a co-working space that was, I don't know, this would probably not all fit in that space.
Yeah, it was quite small.
And we were looking for our first hire, and you said, well, I was mom then because it was just the two of us. She said, Mom, you ran HR at Goldman Sachs. You clearly know how to use LinkedIn. And I'm like, that would be no, because I hadn't done it myself. For me, that was a moment of where there were things that I was going to have to learn by doing as well, despite the years I'd been, out there. But I also early on learned from you, Jordan, that there were things that came with the experiences that I had that were hard to replicate. And, so in those early days, with my hesitancy not to be that over the top, you would say, you like, hello? What should we do here? So it's been an extraordinary learning curve for me, and am inspired by the incredible team that we have.
Absolutely.
And the impact that we've made on people's lives and on their careers.